Maori koto. So what that means is good morning, or good morning, all of you in Te Reo Maori. Te Reo means Te is the, Reo is language, so the Maori language. You can also say morena. That's another way of saying good morning. And it is a lovely morning, and it's an early morning. I'm on the trot. I don't have wheels at the moment, which is a pain. But if you're going to go for a walk anywhere, then it's a nice place to do it and a nice morning to do it. So hello. So I want to talk about a diverse subject. I cover lots of things on this channel, which is my downfall, because it's never a good idea to cover too many things on a channel, because people like to come to one place for one thing, and you don't get that here. You get all sorts. So I want to talk about Daphne Du Maurier. Okay, so that's kind of pretty far out, isn't it? And I want to talk about why she is described as a writer of Gothic fiction. I'm just crossing a road here, so I'm being a bit careful, okay? Because that kind of surprised me when I first heard it, because I kind of think of Gothic as, Dracula, Frankenstein, So before we go any further, what I would like to know, if you put this on pause, and in the comments, just tell me how you define Gothic fiction. Okay, so I'm talking about writing here specifically, so I narrow it down a little bit. So people often talk about Gothic novels, but it's not necessarily just a novel, is it? It could be short stories or even poetry. So, Edgar Allan Poe, The Raven, I would describe that as Gothic poetry. So Gothic literature. Okay, how would you describe it? So pause the video, put in the comments how you would describe that, and then when you've done that, we will resume the conversation and I'll maybe give you a different spin on it. Okay, see you later. Hey, back again. So what's good morning in Te Reo? Let's have a little quick Te Reo lesson here. Atamarie or morena. Okay. So now Gothic. So if you look at kind of fiction writing kind of theory, good kind of received wisdom says that good kind of practice in writing fiction is that there are three core elements. So there's characters, plot, and setting. So one of the definitions of Gothic literature is that mood is a predominant factor in the literature. So in a sense, you could say that there are kind of four elements. So you've got character, plot, setting, and mood. So mood is a huge element to things, and that is one of the leading kind of definitions of Gothic literature. So that made sense to me. I can see why now Daphne Du Maurier would fit into that. So think about Jamaica Inn. That is the most moody novel I think I've ever read. In fact, I found it kind of it made me feel terrible reading that. It felt like this oppressive, claustrophobic, fearful, grim, dark sort of feeling that kind of seemed to be unrelieved, and it seemed to go on for something like months. So and it's not kind of completely resolved at the end, really. So that's kind of that would tell me why, because I think she does write dark stuff. She does write kind of she does go into kind of some paranormal or some does she go into paranormal? Yeah, kind of. May or may not be the right word. I mean, one of her novels, House on the Strand, is kind of science fiction, really. So that's why she's Gothic. Now, I'm fascinated by Daphne Du Maurier as a person. I find her writing really kind of quite odd. What I find is, because I'm not always very good at picking up on things at the best of times, so I quite often finish a Daphne Du Maurier story. I say story because she writes short stuff as well as novels, with a kind of kind of very kind of clueless about, you know, what the meaning is or what the ending is supposed to be. And I think that was something that she did, is, you know, she liked to kind of leave you to make your own conclusion, leave you hanging a little bit as a reader. So so just a few more thoughts on Daphne Du Maurier. So one of the reasons I find her fascinating, A, is because her novels are so kind of ambiguous, if you like, or they're kind of I don't know if ambiguous is the right word, but there's always this element of interpretation that's required. But yeah, as a person, I mean, if you look at pictures of her when she was young, she was kind of stunning. She was married to a military officer who was responsible for the planning of the Arnhem operation during World War II, a bridge too far, which cost a lot of lives. You know, that was it was a brave move, but lots of things went wrong on that. And kind of sexually, she's very interesting as well, because apparently, you know, she was quite a libertine, and it's believed that she was, you know, bisexual in her tastes. She had a sister. She had 3 sisters, and one of her sisters, you know, way before these things were kind of acceptable, appeared to have living as a gay couple. And on a personal level, or even more personal, I'm just going to run across the road here because the lights are beeping at me. I covered this a little bit I touched on this in another video, but one of the things that I did is walk the southwest coast path in the UK, and of course Daphne Du Maurier. I mean, talking about mood being an extra element in Gothic fiction, the setting is immensely important in Daphne Du Maurier stuff. Not all of it is set in Cornwall, but where it is set in Cornwall, it's really set in Cornwall. And how would you describe how she uses Cornwall in her literature? Well, you could say almost that Cornwall is a character. You know, Cornwall is more than a setting; it becomes a character. You know, and it has its mood. So, you know, so again reinforces that whole kind of Gothic definition. So, getting back to the coast path, which I'd love to do actually, because I emigrated before I completed the walk. I had 2 little sections of walk back in the UK that I can't complete, which is driving me nuts. But one of the last sections of walk that I did, I knew it was near Daphne Du Maurier's home, or one of the places that she lived, the last place that she lived, in fact. I didn't really clock where exactly it was when I was on the walk, but I got lost in a kind of semi-deliberate kind of way. Basically, I left the coast path to try and make it a circular walk, and followed a footpath which kind of ran out in the way that footpaths suddenly do. Paths in forests do that as well, don't they? Have you ever been in a path and followed a path in a forest that seems to be, you know, clear, established path seems to be going somewhere, and you follow it, and it gets more and more difficult to see the path, and then it kind of just fizzles out, doesn't it? Why do forest paths do that? Anyway, that's a digression. So I got lost, and then I ended up walking around the back of a house, and I thought, well, this will lead me back onto the road. And it appeared to be quite a big house with kind of grounds and the strangest buildings. And I'm going to use one of the picture that I took of one of the buildings as a thumbnail for this video. And the thing that, you know, came more and more to my mind was, you know, this looked like a kind of a ritual, kind of, you know, very Masonic, very kind of ritual. I still don't know the answers to this. I know there's a big Masonic centre in the village. There's a Masonic kind of, I don't know if you call it headquarters, but it's more than a lodge, you know, it's kind of some sort of centre. So I walked past this, and there were kind of strange kind of columns and things that seemed to not be part of paths, and very interesting. And then I kind of, in looking into it afterwards, now I'm just pausing here, I'm at the library, and I've returning some books. So there's a little chute that you put the books in. There you go. Fantastic library, really, really good. And it's part of a museum, all free. In New Zealand, some of the free stuff you get, the quality of parks, libraries, museums, absolutely fantastic. There we go. Right, we dropped off our library books, so we can resume. And you can probably hear some classical music playing. They play classical music outside. It's kind of piped outside the library, which is very civilised, isn't it? So this place fascinated me. Anyway, I put something on Facebook about it to see if anyone knew anything, and somebody responded. It was somebody that actually had, I think, met Daphne Du Maurier when they were very young. There was a family connection, and told me that this house, which then this place was indeed her last home, just opposite was the house that inspired Mandalay, and that was a bigger house, and that's where she lived before moving to the house that I walked around the back of. And so it's not Mandalay, and the name of the house has actually escaped me, which is very annoying. So I think Kilmarth. That's it, Kilmarth. So this is Kilmarth House, and that picture of that strange building that doesn't seem to have a ground floor, but just has an upper floor. Little chimney there. Doesn't seem to be for accommodation. I guess, if you're an artist, maybe you could sit up there and paint or something like that. It could be a studio, but I kind of kept thinking ritual. Features in this novel that I mentioned earlier, The House on the Strand, which is kind of a sci-fi novel which involves kind of time shifts. But it kind of features I don't really like to use the cliche mad scientist. I think it's used too often and inaccurately, but it features a scientist who basically kind of stumbles upon a means of time travel. That's not really a spoiler. You kind of read that on the back of the book. And in the cellar, that's where the laboratory is. And there's all kind of strange things in there. And apparently when Du Maurier moved in there were strange things in the cellar in this house, which inspired the book, which inspired the plot of the novel. So it's really interesting. Du Maurier, by the way, was a made-up name. But what a brilliant name. It's a great name, isn't it? Du Maurier. And one thing I found interesting when I was... I texted myself a reminder to do this video, and I started to write Du Maurier, but in a kind of hurried way, so I didn't spell it correctly. And the spell check immediately gave me Du Maurier, the full word. So she's in the language, she's in the spell check. So, and there's actually a video you can watch on YouTube of Daphne Du Maurier in the grounds of Kilmarth, kind of giving an interview. So she's one of these historical characters that I think I would, quite like to have met. I'd love to know more about her. I've tried to get hold of biographies, but I've never really got very far with that. I've read some bits and pieces here and there, and kind of occasionally read a novel and then scratch my head at the end of it, really. But yeah, interesting definition of Gothic, isn't it? So nothing to do with, because I kind of have connotations with kind of Gothic literature of it being Victorian, which of course it doesn't have to be, and it's like some things that or certainly 19th century, let's say. But actual Gothic novels predate that. But if I go into a kind of a Victorian building that's still in the style of Victorian, I kind of, immediately I kind of think Gothic. And where do we draw the line with Gothic fiction? I think I've not read a lot of Conan. I'm going up a hill now, which is why I'm slightly breathless. I've not read a lot of Conan Doyle, but I did enjoy Hound of the Baskervilles, and I would say that was Gothic. So what do you think of Daphne Du Maurier? Do you understand the endings? What do you, if you haven't already, what are your thoughts on how, having listened to this, what do you think about that definition for Gothic literature? I'm going to run now because the lights are on green. dash across the road. So yeah, what do you think about that definition of Gothic literature being literature where mood is like the fourth component? They're not three components, but four components. And does anybody know anything more about the strange buildings at Kilmarth? Because I'd love to know all about that. It'd be absolutely fascinating. So before I completely run out of breath, I will say farewell. And as we kind of thrown in a bit of a free Te Reo Maori lesson today, the word that I used to sign out, rangi Maori, means peace. Interesting, the word rangi has lots of kind of associations with sky, the colour blue, heaven, leadership. So rangi kind of seems to connote, higher things, really, including things like peace. So that's what I sign out with, is peace. So rangi Maori.